And welcome to Civil Discourse. I'm Jamie Wojciechowski.
And I'm Marilyn Brown, and today we are discussing mindful love. So it's one day after Valentine's Day, and mindful love, and more specifically, the importance of falling in love with yourself. So I'm going to start us off with a quote. This is from Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. Find the love you seek by first finding the love within yourself. Learn to rest in that place within you. That is your true home. So when I read that quote, Jamie, what is that immediate? What comes up for you when I read that?
What comes up to me is the first thing I think about is the importance of self-love in relationship to, I guess, the standard concept of love, which is love between two beings. And without we tend to focus on that love between beings as kind of the starting point, and it's really, I think it makes it challenging for a lot of people because people try to find that love in other people and not in themselves, and it's very challenging to allow yourself to be open enough to love other beings if you don't love yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's kind of why I wanted to discuss this topic because yesterday being Valentine's Day, it was awesome being online and seeing all the positive posts and people connecting and sharing just details of their relationships and how they met and all these beautiful posts of people's kids and it was really really cool. And I thought so much of it is focused on that relational love. And relational love is a beautiful thing, but that there has to be a starting point for that, and self-love is really kind of where we have to start to really be able to have healthy relational love with others. And so that kind of got me thinking in the morning because I think a lot of times, when we are focused on the external love, I think the other side to Valentine's Day is that if people maybe are single and or maybe went through a difficult breakup or for whatever reason are not happy with their relationship, or lack of relationship with someone else, there can be this feeling of like just immediate depression that day. Like this is a day where everybody is connecting and I don't have someone to connect to. And so I think the
Right.
flip side to, all that beautiful, all the candy and the flowers is that there may be somebody in the office who has not celebrated a Valentine's Day with anyone in years, and that can be a really hard day for them. And so, I think when we're focusing on that external love, the flip side can be that can lead to a lot of loneliness and isolation for people. And so, I just started thinking what really precedes even having a healthy relationship with someone else. And it's that relationship with yourself. I saw one of those little, I don't know if you call them an infographic or a meme or what, but just one of the little quote squares. And, it said that you won't talk to anyone else as much as you talk to yourself in your own head. And so you really have to be kind. And that really, really hit home to me. I mean, you think about all the conversations that you may go over and over again with someone else that you've had, but how many times are we beating ourselves up all day long because of something that we feel like we didn't do well? And that's where our ability to connect with others comes from.
Yeah, and it's all, I mean, the way we express love for ourselves or for others is all very much based on conditioning. In a way, it's the patterns of the way people have loved us, what resonates with us, what doesn't. And it's hard if you don't have a practice of self-love and you're constantly in your head doubting yourself or not trusting yourself, these things, it's hard to then break that pattern when you're dealing with other people. So that voice that's in your head, you're talking about talking to yourself. The way you talk to yourself is how you're going to engage with others. So
Yes.
if you don't have a healthy way of engaging with yourself, there's no way you're going to be able to have a healthy relationship with anyone else.
Right. Right. And so kind of going off of that, thinking about what is a mindful self-love practice look like to you? When I say self-love practice, because you kind of use those words of like having like it's something that you actually have to work at.
Right. I think a lot of it is a mindfulness practice, a meditation practice can be a great way. Anything that gets you, it's the same thing we talk about a lot. It's just the awareness of self gets you actually diving deeper within yourself, and that could be a meditation practice, that could be a hobby, it could be art, it could be anything that expresses yourself in a healthy way that gives you, I don't want to say meaning, it's not meaning, but gives you that kind of that spark.
Yes.
You know, and I don't think I need to explain it because I think most people you have it. You know
Mm-hmm.
what it is, and if you don't have it, then the first step is exploring things. Find where that is because everyone has it somewhere. Just because you haven't found it yet, go take classes, do a meditation practice if you haven't started already. And sometimes it takes time to develop that as well. It's not that you're going to go into one painting class or one yoga class and all of a sudden you're going to be enlightened and have that spark and be like, this is my home. It's things you have to, it's a never ending process.
Process. Yeah, definitely. So finding things that feel good, kind of fuel your spirit, fuel your soul in a way. And I also think challenging or getting more curious and non-judgmental about just your own self-talk. I think that that's another really important piece. And I think that oftentimes, you know, as you start a meditation practice and start to spend time going within you, that's what it is. You're trying to become more aware and kind of curious about yourself. And when I did that, you know, I really realized that a lot of the things that I would get frustrated with myself about were just they were just things. They weren't either good or bad. And I think a lot of times, you know, we've been conditioned to judge and to label things based on, you know, our experiences or our feelings around them, rather than just looking at them as information. So I'll give you a personal example. So for me, I'm somebody that has always wanted to be more active than I am naturally inclined to be. And so I've always just thought, gosh, it would be so cool to just be one of those people that like wakes up and wants to go for a run,
Right.
you know, man, that would be great. You know, I remember I had a roommate in college, freshman year in college, and she would just get up and run like 8 miles. And it was just like, whoa, like that is so cool. But that was just what felt good for her. And it wasn't this thing that she had to like fight to do. She just woke up and wanted to do it, you know, whereas that was never something that I've been inclined to do. And so when I'm in, you know, when I was in a place where I wasn't mindful and I wasn't aware of these things, I would judge myself as lazy. You know, I'd say, oh gosh, I'm just so lazy. Why can't I just get, you know, active? Why can't I be that person? I'm just so lazy. Oh, so frustrating. And I would try to, you know, and I would go back and forth. And the thing that happens when we judge these things rather than just being able to look at them in a non-judgmental way is that I didn't get less lazy as I was judging myself being lazy. You know, it didn't help
Right.
me move towards the fitness goals and being healthier. It actually pulled me away from them because it led me into this very polar place where either I was like, you know, trying to extremely regiment myself into something that wasn't natural, or I was on the complete other end of the spectrum where I wasn't doing anything. And so it led to this, you know, kind of just stuck point. And mindfulness was really what got me out of that, realizing, okay, so some people are naturally more energetic. And I would start to kind of just notice people and just notice myself and just think, okay, and certain people are also more peaceful. And what are the benefits to that? What's the value in that? You know, and realizing that I have a pretty calm presence. I have a pretty kind of relaxed presence about me. And you know, so I started relabeling this idea of lazy as like, I have a sedentary spirit, you know, and it sounds kind of silly, but that was actually what worked for me, to just kind of realize this is me. And rather than fighting against it or judging it, if I can just embrace, okay, well, I have a sedentary spirit, but I really love to move if I'm dancing. Or I really love to move if I'm doing something, else that feels good for me. And so I started to find those things naturally without it being, this struggle. And even talking to my mom about it and realizing that, like, even in the womb, like, I barely moved around. Like, I was totally healthy in there, but like I was just chilling. Like, that's me. I'm also extremely patient. Like, I don't get super stressed out in traffic. So, but just kind of that process of coming to this place of non-judgment, to be able to see myself truly for who I am. And that's, I think, where that real kind of self-love comes from. Even like the term self-love, I feel like that, just even just seeing yourself, just being able to see yourself and appreciate yourself for the individual that you are.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because self-reflection, what what I see a lot of is people when they self-reflect are actually asking themselves the right questions, but it's the judgment and the blame that they put on top of the questions that cause them not to be productive or effective or mindful. So they're
Yeah.
saying, why do I feel this way? But there's this, or why is this other person doing this? Or why, whatever the question is,
Why
those
do
are
I
all
feel this way?
great.
Because I suck, or because yeah, there's
Right.
some.
They add the blame that they already have an idea or an opinion based on it, as opposed to actually genuinely asking the question without any of that on top and then digging deeper and deeper and deeper. Because the other thing is you're better at then discovering not only who you naturally are, but how you can thrive and how you can change when you're like that. Because you could say, not just using your example, as if you're not very active and you're asking yourself why that is, you may find out that, oh, there's something that I'm actually fearful of or hiding from that's stopping me from doing that. But it's
Mhm.
actually something I would love to do, as opposed to necessarily thinking, oh, this is who I am. You may come to that decision, but if you come on with judgment, you're not going to come with either of those decisions. You're just going to be overcome by that judgment, because what happens is you're asking the question, but that's not actually what you're doing. The judgment takes over. So
Yes.
whatever that judgment element is what you're going to be feeling.
Right.
And it's
Right.
like you might as well never have asked the question, because you've already placed the blame, you already have the judgment, and that's what you're going to sit in. And I think when talking about relationships too, because I think self-love and love with others is very much about balancing the two. Because I know there's tons of books there that say you have to start with self-love, like that's the only way to love someone else. And I think everyone's different. Some people can learn self-love through
Mhm.
being in love with someone else or how someone else treats them.
Mhm.
And we're a species that is very interconnected, and we thrive off, even if you're an introvert, I'm an introvert, complete introvert, and I still know that connection gives me energy. It's important to us on every level. And I think just having that awareness that those things have to go hand in hand help. Because if you're in a relationship and something is not right, you can self reflect on why. And if you take that judgment out,
Right.
you exploring why, you may find that, oh, it's something in me that's not working, or maybe it's with this other person, and where I'm at the moment, that's why it's not working, because we're not being able to connect. Or you may see that this person's not where you are, and you're at where you both are is never going to come together in this moment. But it gives you kind of a way to process it in I don't want to say less emotional way, but a more productive way that actually allows you to see clarity in what's happening, as opposed
Mhm.
to feeling overwhelmed or by anything or out of control. In mindfulness, they often talk about the monkey mind.
Uh-huh.
And what happens is people think when you meditate that you're not supposed to think, which is a major
Myth.
misconception. And what to me, what it is that it's not that you don't feel, or it's not that you're not thinking, it's that you're teaching yourself to be in control of your thoughts and of your emotions, so that if you're sad, feeling sad or angry isn't bad. What It's just not helpful when that emotion is controlling you, as opposed to you embracing that emotion fully and then being able to move on to the next moment and whatever that emotion is. And I think that awareness of being able to ask those kind of questions, whether it be with self-love or with a relationship with someone else, is how you start to do that.
Yeah, yeah. It's like that like mindful kind of sweet spot. Like if you think about the Venn diagram where they have emotion mind on one side and then reasonable mind on the other, and then that wise mind place in the middle where the two come together. And so you're able to, you're still feeling the emotion, you're taking a lot of information from the emotion. The emotion is really your teacher. And you are being reasonable and allowing yourself not to get caught up into the emotion so much that you're not grounded in your rational mind of being able to decide how do you want to respond and what's kind of an effective way to move forward. And so, yeah, I think that relationships can be a great opportunity to learn and kind of process and learn how to even just deal with emotions. I think that's something that we didn't really get education on, and I think like it would have been really helpful in middle school to like, or before middle school, maybe like first grade or something, to learn more about emotions and like learn that it's okay to be upset, or you don't have to run away from sadness. There's something that you do with it, and that there's information there. I think that's something that we just don't really focus on. And so a lot of us are kind of just we reach adulthood and kind of get into these relationships, and we're crashing into each other, not really knowing how to process emotions. And so we do have to learn in the moment. And I think that people can definitely, move forward. But I think that it's about, like you said, being able to really be aware and check in and reflect on what you're actually feeling and what that means to you.
Yeah, and I think too, self-love and external love are very similar, but they are also the way most people engage in them. They engage in two very different ways. And I think that mindful element will also help a lot of people see the positives in how they engage with each one. I'll give an example. I know a lot of people who do have a very healthy self-care, self-love practice still struggle with relationships. And when I try to analyze why that is, what I often see is that they're not actually behaving with others the way they behave with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So with themselves, they're very mindful and they ask those questions. But when they're with others, they let the others drive their emotions. So they're not able to necessarily do that. And what I often tell them is, well, it's very difficult, that especially if you're in a fight, or if it's a peak emotion, to consciously take yourself out of it. But as soon as you can find awareness, or as soon as you have that moment of, oh, I need to step away and think about this, allow yourself to do it. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people don't.
Yes.
And that's where you're going to learn the most. And it's hard because, especially in relationships when they're very emotionally draining, it is a lot of work to be mindful. It takes a lot of energy, and a lot of times after there's a big emotional release, people just want to relax. They don't want to do that kind of work that needs to be done. And I always I challenge people to do that work, because it benefits so much in the long term, in ways that you won't see just in that moment of it being uncomfortable or being painful.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that there's kind of this, we're conditioned to like force our way through certain situations rather than taking a step back. Like you think about, as you were just talking about, I was imagining a couple like fighting late at night, and they're both just pissed and want to go to bed, but like that old adage ringing in somebody's head, like, you can't go, don't go to bed while you're fighting, right?
Hmm.
Never go to bed when you're fighting, and that kind of thing. And it's like, well, sometimes maybe that's okay, to respectfully kind of both take a step back and realize that you're not moving forward, and to be able to honor your feelings in that moment, that maybe we aren't going to be able to come to a resolution right now. I think that we're just so conditioned to kind of want to like fix. And I think that's the unmindful part of it. And I think that when we're with the self, and we're able to kind of, we're working on self-love, we're able to be more patient with ourselves in that way, and not try to fix it, just kind of check in and see what I need for today. But then with relationships, I think we feel this pressure to try to just fix what's going on, and rather than recognizing that sometimes, you just kind of have to take a step back.
Yeah, and I think there's also, I feel, a danger with self love, and I've been thinking a lot of like what are other terms that I would say are equivalent to self
Hmm.
love in the way we're talking about it, and the closest thing I could get to it is self curiosity almost,
Hmm.
because a problem with self love in the way I think a lot of people hear that or end up practicing that is it becomes ego driven, and then it lacks the mindfulness element. So it
Hmm.
becomes about the self. So
Hmm.
then when you do have relationships with others, it becomes about yourself and
Right.
your ego, and not the other person's. And I
Hmm.
think that's a big thing, because if you're having a healthy, mindful self love that's rooted in curiosity for understanding self, that should move into the relationship and having
Yeah.
curiosity for how to love the other person. I think is it the five love languages, what,
Hmm. Hmm.
that everyone experiences or feels love in different ways, and a lot of
Yes.
times people want to show others the way they want to show others love based on the way they receive love, instead of finding out how that person
Yes.
receives love. And
Yes.
I think that's a huge, that is 100% what I'm talking about when
Yeah.
I say self love and
Yeah.
mindfulness, for what you do for yourself and when your relationship with others. It's asking that question as opposed to leading from ego. Well, I feel this way, so this person must feel this way, or
Right.
I'm having this experience right now, so that must mean that this is authentic to me,
Hmm.
when it may not be. So it's
Right.
diving into that. Well, what makes me feel love, what makes me feel genuine, what makes me feel of service to others. Like, I think the bigger question is what is love.
Yeah.
Love is service to other, service to self, and it has to be a balance of the two. It can't be one or the other. If you're just serving yourself, that's not love. If you're just serving others, that's not love. It's the balance of the two.
Yeah. That's a really, really great point. You make such a great point, because I think that a lot of times people get unbalanced in the other way. So there's kind of that over self-love, I've got to focus on me, and that kind of balance. But I see as a therapist a lot of the other side, where people
Right.
are so sacrificing for others, and take care of others, and they're unable to really pour any of that back into themselves. And I think you really speak to it's such an important point, that there has to be a balance, and there has to be kind of an exchange going back and forth of the two, and that's not love either. And I think that you see people, if they do it to the extreme, the extreme where someone is just so sacrificing for others, that there's a term like someone being a martyr or something like that. But a lot of times there's a lot of resentment and anger that happens to someone when they do that, when they're completely sacrificing themselves for other people and not pouring that love into themselves. When you're out of balance either way, there's going to be a downside. There's going to be kind of that shadow quality to it, and it leads to where you'll see some of the nicest people in the world be so resentful, and really have this like really kind of angry dark side. And I think it's because of that lack of balance.
Yeah, and I think too a good point is if anyone is feeling out out of balance, it's two points I want to make. Is one, being out of balance is a sign that something else, there's something deeper. There's a reason that you're out of balance.
Mhm.
So I feel like what ends up happening is what you're saying is a lot of people are aware they're out of balance and then have judgment
Mhm.
about themselves based on it. And I think that just feeds the imbalance even more, as
Right.
opposed to if you're aware, oh, something's not in balance here, why?
Hmm.
And ask yourself, that's the mindfulness aspect of it, and then you can figure it out. Maybe you're afraid of something or something happened that you can begin to work through, but until you start asking yourself those questions without the judgment, you're never going to have that breakthrough.
Right, right. That's a really good point. Maybe something happened or someone pushed your boundaries. You hear people in like codependent relationships where they just don't realize that they're even out of balance and kind of or feeling out of balance, but not like you said, asking that next question, well, why am I so out of balance here? What's really going on that I'm in this place?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it's very much human nature too. I think
Hmm.
most people probably don't realize they're out of balance because
Right.
it's we're so conditioned to lead with opinion and judgment
Yes.
that the safest and most comfortable way for us to consciously express that is to blame someone else. So a lot of times if you are really into yourself, it's because no one else is worthy or whatever it is. There's a reason, you put an external reason on others for why that is. Or if you don't have self-love practice and you're giving it to everyone else, that there's a conscious reason that you put on it that may not be the real reason in the judgment. And it's
Yeah.
then getting rid of that judgment to find what's deeper that's going to help resolve that. And I think everyone, what we're saying is everyone should do that whether you feel in balance or not, because
Right.
you may feel in balance and you may not be, and that just, if you are in balance, it deepens that the balance and
Experience.
that
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
experience by having those questions. So
Yes. And
whether you're, no matter where you're at, there's only benefit to being mindful in that situation.
right, right. It even deepens your knowing of what that balance feels like and your ability to kind of bring yourself to that place when you need to. So either way, that curiosity is not there's only benefit to asking those questions and to taking that time to really going inside.
Yes, it reminds me of actually another quote that the Dalai
Mm.
Lama said. That's one of my favorite quotes is, the more you're motivated by love, the more fearless and free your action will be.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's a good one.
So I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this question. Uh, what is what do you find to be your biggest struggle with self love?
Hmm, that's a good question. I would say my biggest struggle would be conditioning. The messages, growing up as a Black woman in America, there's a deeply rooted message that we're not beautiful, that Black women as we are not beautiful. And so, and it's interesting growing up and getting struggling with that kind of deeper message, but also getting a very different message personally and just in my life with people, but still. And so it's funny because it's not, I wouldn't have even said 2 years ago that would have been a struggle because I didn't even see it as such until kind of other layers were peeled back
Right.
later, realizing how much the the conditioning around race and beauty and how much Black beauty is marginalized, that I hadn't even realized how much of that I internalized for myself. So yeah, I would say that's definitely been the biggest struggle. And it's really cool because I think that in the last couple years especially, there's been so much more conversation about these topics, just on a national level. And so realizing that like I'm not alone. There's so
Right.
many women who are in my life who I just, you don't realize when you struggle with it inside, you don't think to ask the other people around you whether they're struggling with that same thing. You just kind of assume, she looks good, she looks happy, she looks fine with herself. You don't realize that we've all kind of internalized on some level these messages. And so that's been really interesting, kind of an interesting process to me to go through and uncover for myself.
Yeah, there's actually been a few videos on YouTube going around dealing with that topic. And it's interesting because I said at the beginning that the way you talk to yourself and engage yourself is often how you engage with others. But at the same time, there's an element that's the opposite of that, because in a lot of these videos, the realization is they're in a group and people are talking about it, and they're realizing two things: that it is a shared experience, and that even though they have all those issues in the way they communicate with themselves, they don't experience it with the other. So they don't think, like, they have these things
It's
conditioned in how they feel about
first,
themselves is, I'm not pretty, I'm not this because whatever this reason is. But
right.
then when they see other people who are that, because they don't say you're not beautiful, they think, oh, you're beautiful,
She's
you're
beautiful. Yeah.
whatever.
Yes.
So
Yeah. You can see it in others. You can see that in others, but but internally, that struggle, that negative message is internalized with the self. That is interesting. Yeah, because that's definitely been my experience. And so until you really kind of bring these topics up and talk about them, and me working with Black women with eating disorders, this topic comes up, and talking about just beauty and the conditioning around it, and you realize, like, no, there's a little bit of that in I think in all of us, but Black women that have grown up in this country and gotten the messages that we've gotten, regardless of what the message was that your family gave you or the people around you to counter it. There's still this kind of overlying message, that we have to work against. And I think that we definitely are. And I think the more people talk about it, the more we're realizing that actually, interestingly enough, Black beauty is oftentimes the standard for a lot of different things, but then it gets morphed and turned into different things. And so it's interesting when you kind of see how that's happened, and kind of like recognize, like, no, I don't know. It's interesting to me. The more I learn about it, the more pride I get, the more the more I love myself, and it just gets easier and easier the more I learn. And so,
yeah, it's interesting because I feel like uh, there's kind of two things I want to say. One, I'll say this first, is it what I like about what you're saying is the shared experience. And I think an important part of self-care and mindfulness is when you have those kind of realizations, to do exactly what we've been saying, is not judge and not think they're bad.
right.
So
Yeah.
it's not bad that you feel that way, or that you realize that messaging, and even though like that's not true, you still feel that way. That's not bad. That's the first step to being
Yeah.
mindful and to digging deeper and peeling those layers away. If you start labeling those experiences as bad or negative experiences, it's much harder to peel those layers away, because it's
Right.
almost sealing them down,
Right.
because
Right.
you're making yourself feel worse for the way you're feeling about things, as opposed to exploring why. And the other
Right.
thing is, this is kind
Yeah.
of this separate conversation, but on the whole kind of societal issue that you're talking about, I think a lot of it comes down to kind of materialism and the way we market things. And you were talking about how it's interesting because some things are about celebrating Black beauty and other things are about creating the narrative, kind of almost against it. And I see that, you see that almost with everything. You see that with females in general. You see it, I mean, it's different varying levels based on things, but you see it with the idea of masculinity in the way our culture is, and then you see masculinity varied between race and all these things, and it's such a interestingly layered thing, but it is a shared, the root of it is a shared experience that everyone's feeling, because everyone's conditioned to some level to have these messages that were really created to do exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
They were put there so that you would go see a movie, or you'd want to buy this product because it would make you feel more beautiful, or whatever it is. So they were specifically put there to make us feel the way they are making us feel.
Right. To create this feeling of like of not having enough, of like needing to change something or fix something or some sort of inadequacy. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even really think about that point. And I wanted to go back to what you were saying about not judging yourself for having those feelings. And I think that is such an important part, because when I was talking about my own struggle, I didn't say that. And that was an integral part to being able to move forward with this. And that was a part that kept me stuck for a very long time. They're on the other side of struggling with, the American beauty standard and feeling like I didn't fit into that. On the other side, I'm very proud to be a Black woman, and I've grown up in an activist family. And so it was hard to even kind of resolve those feelings of like judging myself negatively because of these things, but also having this deep rooted pride in who I am at the same time. And so I think you're right that really it has to start with not judging yourself for feeling those things, and just being able to get curious without kind of, like you said, sealing it into something and making it, getting it kind of stuck. And that's, I think, what created that stuckness for me, for sure. Yeah. I wanted to ask you though, what would you say is your biggest struggle with self-love?
Well, I think fear in general, but on a very subconscious level. And I think it's interesting because I think fear is the opposite of love. So there's probably something deeper in it. But what I see a lot is that fear, and when I'm experiencing this, I'm not experiencing it as fear. Right. It's me thinking about it later where I'm saying, oh, that's what it was. Mm-hmm. Where I stop myself from doing things based on fear is what it comes down to. And it's the littlest things that could help, that I enjoy doing and are actually like bring self-love. Like, I think it's important to highlight the really mundane things, but like going to the gym, like those days where I'll be like, I'll go tomorrow, and I come up with a stupid excuse. And then I realize it's probably, it's linked to a fear of me having body issues. And then even though I don't have big body issues, they're very subtle, but when I do it, I'm like, that's what me not going to the gym is. And then if I go and take my class at the gym, I feel great afterwards. So that's where I started realizing is like, I have all this resistance to go. And then afterwards I feel great. And yet then the next day I have resistance to go, even though I'm aware that it makes me feel great. Yeah. So it's this weird, like, I feel like that's the struggle, because there's an awareness and I try to be mindful in it, but the layers haven't peeled back enough yet where I'm able to control the experience. So I'm not able to control that kind of not wanting to go. And that's only one example. There's tons of them. And I think that's the biggest thing I notice that gets in the way of self-care and self-love. Yeah,
definitely. And I think that, you think about how that could play into so many different things, from the smallest thing of getting up and going to the gym, or getting up and doing a presentation that you were preparing for. I mean, it can, that little that little bit of resistance, that like moment of like, oh no, I don't want to, that moment of fear, of avoidance.
Yeah.
There's so much that can happen in that moment. And I think that you're right, that it's that the change process, I tell my clients this all the time, like the change process, it's a process. And so you're kind of moving along the spectrum. So right now saying like, I'm still not at the point where I can stop it while it's happening. And I kind of still, I reflect on it later and realize it was the fear, but realizing that like continually doing that practice and continuing to get curious, even if it's right in that moment or 2 hours later or the next day, will still get you to eventually being able to, in the moment, have that moment of fear and be like, nah, I'm just going to go,
Yeah.
or asking, well, what is this, and getting curious while it's happening.
And I think just for a tip for people, if they're seeing that their experiences, the hard part about being mindful with it is that the mindfulness for me tends to not come till after the experience. So
Mm-hmm.
it comes when it's, I don't want to say too late, but it comes after when it would make a difference. So what I try to do is trip myself into being mindful at different times. So I have a quote on my fridge about embracing fear. I have my screensaver is about embracing fear, so that hopefully I will throughout the day be reminded, and potentially at hopefully a moment where I then am succumbing to fear and can say no, I know this is what I'm doing. I'm not going to allow myself to do it. And there was a great, who was it? It's a YouTube video going around, and it's about motivation. And the
Mm.
woman giving that, I think it's a TED talk,
Okay.
it was an interview, but I think it was through TEDx that they were doing the
Okay.
interview. And the woman is basically talking about how we focus so much on motivation, and motivation isn't actually helpful. It's the embracing fear
Uh-huh.
that's helpful, because it's fear that's what's stopping you from doing things. So if you get into a habit of embracing fear,
Yeah.
you'll move forward, as
Yeah.
opposed to if you're just constantly looking for motivation, the motivation doesn't necessarily
Doesn't
come.
give you.
You're looking for an external thing to help you move forward, as opposed to you embracing fear as something you're doing.
Right.
And I thought that was, it was a really great TED talk. I wish I remember who
Is it
did it.
Brene Brown? It
It
sounds
no,
like,
no.
no. Okay. 'Cause she talked
Robbins? What's
about.
her first name? Robbins is the last name. I don't know.
Okay.
I'll post it.
Yeah. There'll be a link below.
Is there anything else you would like to discuss?
No, I think we about covered it. I think we about covered it.
Great. We did our quote at the beginning, and I hope everyone had a great Valentine's Day.
Yes. And spread love every day, not just Valentine's Day, but uh-oh, lights went out. Sorry.
That
Spread love
was
every
very
day.
dramatic. Her lights just went out.
And on that note, yeah. Thanks for watching, guys.
Yes, thank you. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next week.
Oh, all right. Bye.
Bye.